So then guys, we've had the release of the brand new iPhones available to us, ranging from the iPhone 16 all the way up to the iPhone 16 Pro Max from Apple. But a lot of you guys are in that situation now where you're possibly thinking, I've got an iPhone 13 Pro Max or an iPhone 13 Pro or similar, and you're thinking of maybe upgrading to the likes of, say, a iPhone 16 Pro Max, and you want to know what the differences are between both these models. Well, the good news is today I've got the best video for you. I'm going to do a review of specs comparison of the iPhone 16 Pro Max versus the iPhone 13 Pro Max. And let's get started right away and have a look at the specs differences. So, as we can see here, we have the iPhone 16 Pro Max on the left, and then we have the iPhone 13 Pro Max on the right for this comparison. And let's get started then. So, first of all, the display type. Both of these iPhones actually have an OLED XDR display in both of them, and they're very similar in their technology. They are slightly different, as you will see a bit later on, but the main thing is they're both OLED XDR. But the actual screen sizes, when we move on to this, there is the difference here. For the first time in ages, the iPhone Pro Max range has gone up in size now. With the 16 Pro Max, we've got a 6.9-inch display. And the main reason behind this is that the iPhone is slightly larger. I mean, ever so slightly larger. But the main thing is, as you can see even in these pictures here, the bezels are far smaller around the side. So the edges there, that black border is far smaller, the thinnest I've ever seen probably on a smartphone here on the iPhone 16 Pro Max compared to the iPhone 13 Pro Max. So that's why we have a 6.9-inch display instead of a 6.7. But what does this mean in screen resolution? Well, both of these iPhones in their ratio to start with, they both have the same ratio of 19 by 5 by 9, but the resolution is very different. So as you can see here, it's 2868 by 1320 for the iPhone 16 Pro Max, mainly because of that larger screen, and then the iPhone 13 Pro Max has a 2778 by 1284. But for clarity reasons, what does this mean in pixels per inch? Well, the iPhone 16 Pro Max actually has a 460 pixels per inch, or PPI, whereas the iPhone 13 Pro Max had 458 pixels per inch, so just 2 pixels less per an inch. Hardly noticeable, but the main reason is that the 16 Pro Max has a newer type of screen, as you can see right here in the refresh rate, the display refresh rate. The iPhone 16 Pro Max has ProMotion, so does the 13 Pro Max, but the 13 Pro Max had the first generation Pro Max, what could only go down to 10 Hz and goes all the way up to 120 Hz, whereas the iPhone 16 Pro Max can go all the way down to 1 Hz and all the way up to 120 Hz. It's a newer type of display panel, and they've been using this ever since the iPhone 14 Pro models, this type of display, and that's why it is better. And in fact, it also affects the things like the screen brightness. So for example, the iPhone 13 Pro Max came in at 1180 nits. The iPhone 16 Pro Max has a 2000 nit display. This is almost double the amount of brightness you can get in an iPhone 16 Pro Max over an iPhone 13 Pro Max. So there's going to be a difference here. If you're out and about in bright lights, you will see a difference there, definitely. Something else that you'll see a difference is probably the speed. The main reason is with the two processors, as you can see right here, the A15 and also the A18 Pro, we've got 3 years of generations here between both of them. With the iPhone 13 Pro Max, we had a 6-core CPU and a 5-core GPU and a 16-core neural engine. Now, obviously, that 6-core CPU is made out of a 2-core performance and 4 efficiency cores, but back then, this was made on a 4nm die, whereas the iPhone 16 Pro Max with its A18 Pro is made on a 3nm die. It's TSMC's sort of second generation, what they're making here, and again, it's a 6-core CPU, again, 2 performance core, 4 efficiency cores, but it does this time have a 6-core GPU, ray tracing, and a lot more graphical power than what the A15 had. And of course, there's also the 16-core neural engine inside of it too. And then for actual RAM amounts, we do have a difference here as well. The iPhone 13 Pro Max, when that came out, had 6 gigabytes of RAM inside of it. And obviously this was an older technology of RAM, whereas iPhone 16 Pro Max has 8 gigabytes of RAM, and it's obviously the newest type of RAM what you can get like in a smartphone right now. But then moving on to storage amounts, the differences here are very different, as you can see. Back then with the iPhone 13 Pro Max, we could used to get the storage amount from 128 gigabytes all the way up to 1 terabyte. The 13 Pro Max was actually the first iPhone and the iPhone 13 Pro to actually feature 1 terabyte, whereas the iPhone 16 Pro Max, the lowest amount of storage you can get now is 256 gigabytes. You can get the 512 and also the 1 terabyte too. Obviously, as the iPhones, no expansional storage whatsoever, but you can actually connect up a USB drive as well to the iPhone 16 Pro Max, what we'll talk about a little bit later on. But then for operating system, both of them can run iOS 18, and most of both of these iPhones can run a very similar version of iOS 18. Obviously the 16 Pro Max will get Apple Intelligence, what we'll talk again a little bit later on, whereas the 13 Pro Max won't get this, but there is also 1 or 2 extra features the iPhone 16 Pro Max can get with iOS 18 over the iPhone 13 Pro Max. But really, I'd say for the iPhone 13 Pro Max, you've got probably about another 4, maybe 3 years of updates and security updates on this phone, whereas the iPhone 16 Pro Max, you're also going to get about 7 years more updates if you get it when it comes out now. Then for the actual battery life, there is a difference here. And the way how this comparison's been done is that if you actually had the video stored on your iPhone physically, actually in the storage, not streaming it over Wi-Fi or 4G, 5G, whatever like that, actually stored there, had them at the same brightness, had the same sound on both the test here on both these phones, you could get up to 28 hours video local playback on an iPhone 13 Pro Max, but on the iPhone 16 Pro Max, you can get 33 hours out of it. What is definitely a big improvement there on battery life over a 13 Pro Max, so that is quite amazing to see. And in fact, as you can see here, even with the battery sizes, there is a difference here. The iPhone 16 Pro Max comes in at 4,676, whereas the iPhone 13 Pro Max has 4,352 milliamps there. So definitely you are getting a slightly bigger battery, but of course you're getting all those efficiencies with the A18 Pro inside the iPhone 16 Pro Max 2 will also really helps, and also that best display. All these little factors really help out. And then moving over to wired and wireless charging, there's also some differences here. With the iPhone 16 Pro Max, you can actually charge up to 30 watts by USB-C, whereas the iPhone 13 Pro Max can only go up to 27 watts, but you need to plug in, say, a 30-watt charger to actually get that out of it. But then the actual wireless MagSafe charging, there's also a difference here. Apple are now claiming with the iPhone 16 Pro Max, if you get their newest MagSafe charger, what they've just brought out, comes with a 1 meter or 2 meter cable, then you plug this into a 30-watt charger or above, 40 watt, 50 watt, whatever you want like that, you can actually get 25 watts of MagSafe charging out of that. If you plugged it into, say, a 25-watt charger, you will not get 25 watts. You'd get lower, whereas the iPhone 13 Pro Max only does 15 watts wireless charging here, what's the same as what the iPhone 12 models also got, and this is ranged all the way up to the iPhone 15s. Moving along though, for weight, this is quite shocking to see. Even though the iPhone 16 Pro Max is bigger, it actually weighs less than the iPhone 13 Pro Max. And the main reason behind this is the iPhone 16 Pro Max is made out of titanium, whereas the iPhone 13 Pro Max, that was made out of stainless steel. So obviously that was a heavier metal there when that was being created. For water resistance, they're exactly the same here. They're both IP68 rating. This basically means if you dropped it into clear water up to 6 meters and then up to 30 minutes, really shouldn't have any damage to your phone. But obviously it's got to be clear water, like I said, but they're both exactly the same there. Then moving over then to ports. Like I said, the iPhone 16 Pro Max has the USB-C port. And inside of this as well, this port can actually transfer USB free speeds. And this means it can transfer up to 10 gigabits per second. So when I was talking about saying that you could do expansional storage, you can actually plug in an external hard drive, do speeds of 10 gigabits. This is definitely really good for sort of video recordings, RAW and things like this. Whereas the iPhone 13 Pro Max has Lightning but still has USB 2.0 speeds. So we're talking 480 megabytes. You heard me there? Megabytes, not even a gigabyte there. So it's way, way slower and obviously uses the older Lightning port. So really, if you did expansional sort of storage on this, it's not really going to be any good on this phone. But moving along then for stereo speakers, both of them have 2 times speakers on them, stereo speakers. The iPhone 16 Pro Max are a little bit more sharper than the iPhone 13 Pro Max, for example. And then moving along, Apple Intelligence or artificial intelligence. The iPhone 16 Pro Max is like the crown jewel of artificial intelligence right now from Apple, and so is the iPhone 16 Pro, whereas the iPhone 13 Pro Max cannot do any Apple Intelligence or any artificial intelligence from Apple whatsoever. So this is a big gain here, what you'll get if you got yourself an iPhone 16 Pro Max. For Bluetooth technologies, well, the iPhone 16 Pro Max is slightly ahead here with Bluetooth 5.3 over the iPhone 13 Pro Max Bluetooth 5.0, and then for Wi-Fi speeds, we're a whole generation or generation and a half above the iPhone 13 Pro Max. The iPhone 13 Pro Max is Wi-Fi 6, we've had Wi-Fi 6E, and now on Wi-Fi 7, what the iPhone 16 Pro Max uses right now. Then for the rear cameras, and this is a big deal for a lot of people, the iPhone 16 Pro Max cameras are way ahead than the iPhone 13 Pro Max. Just straight away, you can see that we have a 48 megapixel wide and ultra wide in the 16 Pro Max compared to the 12 megapixel in the 13 Pro Max, and the telephoto in the iPhone 16 Pro Max can actually go up to a 5 times zoom, whereas the 12 megapixel telephoto in the 13 Pro Max can only go to 3 times zoom. But both of these phones can record in 4K, but with the iPhone 16 Pro Max, you do have that brand new cinematic slow-mo option where you can record 120 frames per second in cinematic, which is really awesome. But both these phones also feature the exact same LiDAR sensor too. Moving over then to the front though, both of these phones actually feature a 12 megapixel camera and can record at 4K, but the iPhone 16 Pro Max, ever since the iPhone 14 Pro models, had a slightly better 12 megapixel camera put inside of this in that dynamic island. And that's something else to point out, is that you'd be getting dynamic island if you came from an iPhone 13 Pro Max. Obviously this came from the iPhone 14, but it means you get those features in the iPhone 16 Pro Max too. Moving along then for the price then, here's where the difference is. The iPhone 13 Pro Max, when that came out, the base model was $1,099 US for the 128 gigabyte model, but funny enough, if you brought the 256 gigabyte model of the iPhone 13 Pro Max, it cost $1,199 US. What's the exact same price as the iPhone 16 Pro Max with the same amount of storage, 256 gigabytes. So really, like I said, if you got yourself a 13 Pro Max 256, this would be the same price as the 16 Pro Max 256 too. So no differences there whatsoever. Then for colours, well, there are some changes here. And the main reason is the iPhone 16 Pro Max is made out of titanium compared to stainless steel with the iPhone 13 Pro Max. The 13 Pro Max had 5 colours available. That was graphite, silver, gold, Sierra blue on launch, and about 6 months later they also released that gorgeous alpine green, what I really miss personally. And then also for the 16 Pro Max we got 4 colours. We have the titanium black or titanium desert or desert titanium, the way Apple say it, titanium white and titanium natural colours too. So those are your choices right now. And with that, what iPhone model will you be buying? So there we have it, guys. You can actually see, in my opinion, I'd say there's a good amount of upgrades there, what you're going to be getting with getting an iPhone 16 Pro Max. Don't get me wrong, owning an iPhone 13 Pro model or Pro Max for another year or so, yeah, it's still going to be really great. But I'm just thinking there's a lot of upgrades what you've had from the iPhone 14, the iPhone 15, and now the iPhone 16 that could possibly warrant an upgrade right now, in my opinion. That would just be me. I think literally the icing on the cake is Apple Intelligence. If Apple Intelligence wasn't exclusive more to the iPhone 16 and the 15 Pro models, I would personally say maybe wait another year, definitely. But, you know, with that, it does feel a bit more, you know, wanting to go for an iPhone sort of 16 Pro model because of those extra features you get with Apple Intelligence. But that's just my opinion there. Will you be upgrading to an iPhone 16 Pro Max or Pro? Let me know in the comments below. And with that as well, guys, it's time to wrap up this video. So if you have enjoyed watching it, please do press the like button. Also, if you want to hear the latest Apple news, reviews, and comparisons like we've done today, make sure you subscribe to the channel and also hit that notification bell. Until next time, guys, I'll see you really soon. Take care. Bye bye.